coming. Do a show with you wearing your Nino shirt. You know, we can do a little hand gripping together. Is nuclear war coming? Do a show with you wearing your
Oh my gosh!
shirt.
Don't you think that'd be hysterical?
Together.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Oh my gosh! I think yeah, we can have a little fun at Nino's expense. He'll get over it, but I think it'd just be hysterical. So he has no idea that we would do that. That she has a shirt. She's quite proud of it, but it'd be fun to introduce it to audiences while we're out here contemplating the end of the world or whatever. So
Absolutely.
anyway,
Well,
yeah.
It's a beautiful scene there, and so welcome everybody. We have Juan, as you guys can see, Juan O Savin joining us again to reveal what's coming. Coming arrest, preemptive military moving into big cities. So nuclear standoff, like we're talking about. What's mainly on your mind right now, Juan?
Well, you know, of course, I'm here in South Africa. There's a pretty large move here within South Africa to break off in the southwestern portion of the country away from the ANC controlled communists, really. You know, central North Africa region. And so it's actually fairly advanced. They've had almost 1,890 some odd thousand people already vote on whether or not they should, you know, leave the rest of the country and go off on their own. And it's not an official vote. It was more of kind of a, you know, a test within the country about whether or not people should you know start this secession movement. And you know the reasons for it are a lot like what America had when we broke off from Britain. The incredibly high taxes that are just destroying the country in many ways. A good example is Goodyear Tire, who has a large facility here in South Africa. They just recently decided to just give up and go away, walk away from hundreds of millions of dollars worth of infrastructure, property, investments like that, and just go away. Mercedes is considering doing something similar, and they just can't function in this environment where the communist government, for example, one of the things that came up in the meeting earlier today with a very well-to-do businessman, he said that in the last year, his electricity costs have gone up 800%. He says it's unsustainable, and so he's got a couple thousand employees, and he's you know he's going to have to just fold it. And the ANC people running the country there, it's just rife with corruption, payoffs. And remember, you know, what Trump did when the South African president was there in the Oval Office. He was like one of the Harlem Globetrotters. He runs around the ring there in the Oval Office, runs over to the president of South Africa and pantses him to the whole world over all the murders and deaths that are being facilitated here in South Africa. It's almost like it's a free-for-all to kill whites and anybody that's working with them or assisting them. And by the way, here in South Africa, one of the things that people need to understand, there's really three different types of people in the way that they see it. They have coloreds, whites, and blacks. So the coloreds, by most of the black population, are considered, you know, essentially white. The blacks are people that they consider that they were here to begin with, They're a smaller portion of the population, say down here in Cape Town. 17% of the population here in Cape Town is white. About 55% of the population is what they called coloreds. And then the remainder is black. And those numbers have gone up because they've done something else. They're bringing people in from East Africa, north and east, down to the Cape area at the southern tip here, and just planting them in these huge shanty villages. Literally just built, land that's taken from somebody, and they just start building on it. Thousands and thousands and thousands of these tin-roofed dwellings. The rest of the area is relatively advanced, modern, but they have moved huge population here that's only here during the spring, summer, fall months, and then they go home in what is the hottest part of the year in the summer. They move north, back home for Christmas and things like that. And but those groups that are coming down here in that period of time are probably similar to what we would, describe as being a BLM type of a population. A lot of it encouraged by Soros-controlled groups and money, and with the sole purpose of being a threat or a disruptive presence in this region. And the people are literally huge swaths of this region have moved to other parts of the world. Just in the last couple of months, of the doctors, scientists, business people, the figure of 21,000 was used just in the last few months of people that have moved to predominantly the United States, but a lot of them to the Caribbean and to Europe to escape what's happening here, what's coming. So, and you have to understand one of
I
the
saw that
things.
Trump is looking at maybe 40,000 South Africans coming to America, giving them, bring them here. So that's great.
Well, and let me just say this. So as you move north from the area that I'm in, where they're the Cape of Hope is what they would, tentatively call their country, and Cape Town and like that. What's interesting about those people that Trump's encouraging, those are the large farm owners that run these huge farms that are being attacked and being moved out of the country, leave or die type of thing. And every day here in the central regions of South Africa, less so where I'm at because the locals won't tolerate it. They have a lot of almost like a militia-like presence. But about 100 people a day are being slaughtered, whites and coloreds, and their farms taken over, pushed off their property. So they literally are living in some type of armed camp, trying to hold on to these farms and ranches that have been in their families literally for hundreds of years. When this region was settled by the Dutch, that was about 25, 30 years after America declared its independence. And there was a move earlier that was a pilgrim type movement, established same time as New York was established, same year even, in the 1600s. And they literally had something like what we had with our settlers. They landed here in Cape Town area, and then they began to move out across the country in covered wagons. It was, instead of moving west like we did in America, they moved north and to the east. and they built out, these huge swaths of very arid lands, grasses that were really not heavily populated at the time. And then the Brits came in and kind of doubled down on the whole thing. And what started out as kind of a Christian pilgrimage type movement was hijacked and went a different direction with the British here. And so there's kind of this interesting mixed history that went on here. But in many ways, you go out, they're wearing cowboy hats. it's a cattle country. It's horses. It's an amazing area, and but with a history that in a lot of ways is very Americana type stuff, and then with issues that we have similar to our issues back in the States. So not exactly, but it's an interesting area.
So you're saying East Africans, they're importing them there. Is that Somali, Djibouti? What I spent time in both those areas. It's not a good mix.
No, it's more people out of the nation of South Africa, but from regions that are to the north of the Cape area. The Cape area, is fishing. It's a more developed mining area and things like that. So about 15% of the total land mass of South Africa is in this, what they call the Cape region. And it is protected by a fairly defensible mountain chain that there's only certain roads that you can get into this area from. The rest of South Africa to the north. And so the people here and a number of the businessmen have been entertaining this idea of breaking off, in some cases as long as 21 years, and the people represented here today. Most of them have been, the movement's been increasing, and a number of the leaders said, they've been involved, a pretty common number was 5-6 years, that it's just taken on a life of its own, and it's become unbearable with what's going on. You have a lot of Americans will understand this. You have about 7% of the country paying 90+% of the taxes. You have about a little over 0.5% of the total population of South Africa paying the taxes to the 95th percentile. So it's the producers, it's the doctors, the attorneys, the business owners, the inventors, all that sort of thing are just getting, they're working to pay taxes. They're not making any money. And just like the electrical, they haven't built any new electrical generation. The nuclear plant that they have here is what it is. It's just that this communist regime keeps adding supervisors to the whole electrical grid system to where it's a carpetbagger type situation. They've got so many people on the payroll that the cost of electricity has gone up 8 times. And it's not more dependable, it's not better serviced. It's all going to graft just to pay people off, and that's what's happening in the industries. And that's why Goodyear literally just said, okay, done, huge operations here, and they've left the country. So there's not much time to do something to pull this back in most of the people's minds. And so it's do you stay and reach that point where there's nothing left to leave with, or do you leave something still in your pocket? And from a very communist mindset, they're just increasing the number of people and the weight on them. It's like in Egypt, all of a sudden Pharaoh says, not only do you have to produce bricks, you're going to have to go out and gather the straw to make the bricks with, which, they were being at least provided the straw to make bricks to, build out Egypt. but all of a sudden then their day was increased. They have to go out and gather the straw and make the bricks, and it became, so they didn't have more time in their hands to make babies or whatever. So that's kind of what's happening here in South Africa. And the people that are carrying the load are looking at a Boston Tea Party type of a situation. When do you finally say enough is enough and stand and fight and stop? And what does fight look like? They don't want to do it with lead. They want to do it with some kind of a pushback on the central government. And one of the billionaires has said publicly that Rob Herzog has said publicly that they're just going to have to, as businessmen in this region, stop sending any money, refuse to send any money to the federal government for taxes, and keep it all here at home. They aren't getting anything back. For every $100 they send, they get about 7 cents back, and most of that is in the form of support for police that are literally, and tax collectors that are literally the ones enforcing that they take everything that they have. So it's all out, nothing to actually handle roads or infrastructure or anything like that. So they've just reached that limit. Now, here's some stuff that a lot of people may not realize. Do you remember, you're just old enough to remember some of the stuff that happened with the nuclear here in South Africa. Did you ever get briefed on any of that movement of nuclear materials and creation of nuclear weapons here in South Africa?
No, I didn't. But, over the years, I've worked with a lot of South Africans, trackers and, breachers and explosive breaching, so forth. Outstanding people. So bringing those very gifted people that are basically producing 90% of the income tax for South Africa to the United States would be magnificent. That would basically, that would take, I would love that. And I'm sure they probably would too. I know that, like you said, they fought for that for a long time, but here we are, I don't know how this is going to end for them. This is really.
Well, think of it. Yeah, where's Elon Musk from?
Yeah. Good point.
Okay. And by the way, the babe, Laura Logan. Laura Logan's from South Africa.
Oh, I didn't know
a number of the people out there that there's quite a few. John B. Wells' wife is from South Africa. So, I know a lot of business people out of South Africa from stuff that we've had to do over the years. But here's the deal on the nuclear. Back in the late 60s, early 70s, it was reported that Israel tested their first nuclear device here in South Africa and coordinated some of the nuclear work that they had with scientists here in South Africa. And by the way, the first heart transplant with an artificial heart was done by a South African doctor.
Wow.
One of the people I was with today, great guy. In fact, we're going out to dinner here in a couple of days with our wives. He's an inventor that has developed an entirely different type of way to get energy from wave action and ocean movement, here in the oceans. Huge amounts of energy that is really something very interesting, cool. I'm aware of a lot of the wave power generation systems, and he has something that's in a whole different category. And so if you use the motion of the ocean's waters and the currents in the ocean's waters to generate electrical power, it changes the dynamics in a lot of places. And of course, here you've got this huge area, a meeting of the South Atlantic and the Indian Ocean here in this area. Whenever the Suez Canal has a problem up in the Mideast, all of the ships divert in just a few hours. And within 2-3 days, you go from 44 ships to 40 ships to You know, you can have 300-400 ships having to go around the horn here if the Mideast has a problem. And so this is actually a pretty critical area. The best deep water port in the southern hemisphere is right here, just a few miles from me, and where you can put carriers and like that. So it has importance for power projection, say for America. Even Elon has speculated that maybe he'll have to move his rocket launch facilities here to South Africa. It's the best place in the world to do launches to orbit using chemical rocket propulsion systems. If you go to the stuff that I'm working on with others, we don't have the same issues. But for the time being, with stuff like Elon's doing, you can put rockets into equatorial orbits, and you can put them into polar orbits from here. And when you're launching, if you're whichever direction you want to go, it's you're not doing it over populated areas where people are, etc. It even beats Diego Garcia up in the Indian Ocean. So for something high tech, the next stage for the world, the next 20, 50, 100 years, this region is going to be extremely crucial. And by the way, the shortest route to the Antarctic and the best route into the Antarctic isn't from where we're currently doing New Zealand, Australia, or from South America down at Chile and Argentina. It's from right here in South Africa. And so there's a lot of angles where this is a pretty crucial area. And but I'll tell you something that in the West, virtually nobody knows this. The ANC was almost completely broke, literally just a few long months ago. And then a wild thing happened. Russian warships, so it was up here in the area. All of a sudden, black SUVs and trucks and everything else are showing up middle of the night, and this warship is getting stuff loaded onto it. And then there was, people were asking, what in the world is going on here? What's this deal with Russia going on? Behind the scenes, it was said by insiders that this wasn't about Russia. Russia was just transporting something for Iran. And suddenly the ANC is flush with cash again, and they've got, money for all their friends and buddies, and they're really a mobster, Capone type of an operation. And the speculation is what could possibly have been conveyed that might be going to Iran that will be of any value? Well, as I mentioned a moment ago, South Africa, people don't realize this, they're a nuclear power. South Africa, 25 years ago, was widely acknowledged as having 5 nuclear bombs. What's Iran trying to do? And enough fissile material for 5 nuclear bombs. And it was speculated that they, in fact, had gotten technology to build those bombs. They also have the technology to make the triggers and to update that. And some of that technology came out of Israel. Some of it came out of Russia. What would be the point? I've told this audience that there was a question when Krylov, the Russian general, was killed in the scooter attack in Moscow.
Yep.
What was he tracking? He was trying to track down where the materials and devices were coming from, going to, that would refresh about 200 what they call demolition nukes. They're what we would probably refer to for the most part as a suitcase type nuke. They're a little bit larger than that, but an artillery or tactical type weapon.
Mm.
They're not what we would call city busters that take out miles of an area. They're smaller with the explosion, but can, do massive damage and kill thousands and thousands, on par with a little bit bigger than Nagasaki or Hiroshima. And the contention is, and Weldon, Congressman Kurt Weldon, who was on track to be head of the Armed Services Committee in Congress, 20-year congressional elected representative, up until they did some fraud to take him out of office because he was going to be head of the Armed Services Committee. Very trusted, respected congressman. He went over to Russia at Putin's invitation, early 2000s, I think it was 2005 or 6. And Putin had him meet with his top nuclear people, the directors of the programs for their military nuclear projects. He actually went out and viewed their nuclear stockpile, where key components of it were stored. And at the time he was there in the early 2000s, their scientists told him that they were missing about 200 of these demolition nukes, these small nukes, out of an inventory of about 360, I think it was. And that it was the understanding, although they didn't have records, it was all destroyed intentionally, that Gorbachev had offered all sorts of assistance to Iran at the close of the Soviet Union during the Reagan years in the late 80s. And that he had offered these things to Iran for different technical, legal, military reasons. And that Iran got 200 of these tactical nuclear devices. They weren't like a warhead you'd put on a missile and send somewhere. They were stuff you'd put in a shipping container or truck or something like that. And but most of those were close to dating out, timing out, and would have to have technical work done to refresh them. Those have never been accounted for anywhere in the world. Of course, we were looking for something off the East Coast in the months before the election 2024, or some things, and it came out that they were looking for a nuke or nukes, and they were also mapping all of these areas where those drones were at, so they had kind of a backdrop to compare, because some areas have certain types of emissions, factories, hospitals, etc., that you might hide a nuke in that area and it'd be hard to see for different reasons with emissions. But the speculation has been here in South Africa and other places that some of that material that may even have been engineered to help with refreshing some of these nukes is what was picked up here in South Africa, and didn't go right back to Russia and may have gone into Iranian hands. So in this, weird moment that we're in, South Africa, that most Americans would be, yeah, whatever, I don't have time for that. It doesn't matter to me. It's other side of the world. In fact, I'm almost exactly on the opposite side of the world from Anchorage, where Trump is. You can stick, right through the earth. I'm about exactly as far away from Trump right now as you can get, physically on the planet. So it's kind of fun. It's that important, though, to America, because at so many different levels, we actually are very similar people with actually a similar history going back to the Pilgrims and Puritans and like that, and then the way that we settled our regions. It's So this is a very important part of the world.
Yeah, I mean, even the history, if you look at Michael Tellinger's work, there's ancient stone circles, Tesla technology, ancient gold mines. So there's a long history there in South Africa of, ancient cultures and so forth. But yeah, I think that, we have to wrap up all the nukes, and I think that's what President Trump is really trying to do. He wants to make sure all the world is safe, and there in South Africa, and I know you work in the Congo too. If we bring them a way and ways and means to produce and have good trade and so forth, it usually cancels out all this nonsense of war and so forth.
Well, and the problem is with what the ANC is doing. There isn't even a starter where trade could happen. That's why Trump, they came over on a trade mission and were there in the Oval Office like they were going to get a sweet deal. They were going to arm twist Trump, and they were going to get all sorts of sweet deal in exchange for, access to these things. Trump didn't even start the conversation. He just pantsed them right there to the whole world for who they really were. And they're a murderous communist regime, literally. And China's in their back pocket. Soros associations. And 100 people a day are being murdered across South Africa, predominantly up in the farming regions outside of the area that I'm in. And they're not murdered, just, bang, you're dead. They're murdered in very demonstrative ways to terrorize the rest of the population. So the stories about how they murder are pretty difficult to hear. And it's done to terrorize the people to try to get them all to leave. And then their, farms, ranches, wealth just get absorbed. They don't take anything away with them. And these are people that have been here for, a very long time, settled those regions, built those things. And so that's where the fight is. It would be very akin to people going in and doing something similar across the Midwest, and the rest of the country just watching on while, 100 people a day, 100 people a day, 100 people a day are killed. And by the way, in proportion, South Africa has a population of about 70 million. The region that I'm in, the total population that we're breaking off is about 7 million. And it's about 15% of the total land mass of South Africa, about 10% of the population. And the main area where I'm at here in Cape Town, within, 25, 30 miles is about 5 million, just a little under. So kind of gives you a mental picture. America's up there at 350, arguably at over 10%, probably closer to 12 to 14%, depending on who you're asking, is this illegal population that's come in that are not actually U.S. citizens, and but are living in the country, just for scale or proportion. So very important area, though, an amazing area.
Yeah, it's I've looked at that area for a long time. I remember when I was in the SEAL, for early days of SEAL teams, we were talking about Africa quite a bit. It seems to have fallen off, but now it seems to be back on the burner. What is the big push in Africa?
Well, overall in Africa, China, let me compare. I don't think I've heard anybody say this, but, I have an article that I haven't published that I wanted to publish a couple of years ago with the next book, and I probably will publish it here shortly. But England, it said that the sun never set on the British Empire when they were fully in power, and it looks like they're kind of way cut back. The reality is that their strategy that they had for the last 500 years was to control the choke points of commerce around the world, the 7 Cs, if you will. And they did so by controlling the key choke points to the various continents. So when you think of Hong Kong, when you think of Gibraltar as a gate to the Mediterranean, each of these areas, all of China and the trade comes to Hong Kong, to a central point, and then out to the rest of the world. From a seafaring perspective, you control these sea choke points, and then you control whole regions, whole continents, for the purposes of trade and commerce and like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so their empire was based around by sea, controlling the movement of goods around the world from these key choke points, 7 key locations around the world. Even now, these Commonwealth countries that they've retained control and work through still heavily control and influence trade across the world. China, which is being run almost like a branch office of the Brits behind the scenes, hard to get your mind around, but it's actually there from a military side. China's strategy is to similarly own the next 500 years. And so they have been working for quite some time, arguably the last 50, 60 years, to gain control of industries within the raw materials of wealth that come from various places around the world. And they've identified the raw materials that you need for manufacturing to sustain a population, etc. And they've gone to the various parts of the world and tried to control those locations or regions by doing deals, making loans, building things, and then obligating the populations for whatever they've loaned into. And so, for example, in the mining, they have had a steady, very dedicated effort to get into regions where certain types of raw materials, like up in the Congo, you have multiple very rare types of materials that are highly valuable. Cobalt being one of them, other rare earths being in there. And they've gone in and tried to control specific mines, specific locations on the map, and then the countries around them or the politics around them. And in order to have some control over the rest of commerce, they see the future of manufacturing, the most important core material that you have to have in this, the new machinery, the new technology that will dominate, 50, 100 plus years, into the future, related to magnetism, electromagnetic energy transfer, and coherency. The rare earth elements we keep hearing all about, but then other minerals that you need for volume. In the Congo, they have a zinc mine, a copper mine, and when that region was captured back just prior to Christmas by people friendly to China, there was about a dozen different countries or groups that were in the Congo doing mischief. When the president of the Congo, Tshisekedi, asked for help and said, "Trump, you can have everything. You have all the mining, all the minerals in the whole country. Just, help us, save us." And they took over that copper mine. Within a matter of days, the price of copper went up like 30, 40% just because of that one mine at that one strategic location that got taken over by these communist, ISIS, Chinese groups working together that took over that mine that was actually run by an American company. And in the course of what we did, what Trump did in pushing back, they were made an offer that they couldn't refuse, and they vacated that area and pulled back. And once it was apparent that was going to happen, then copper prices restabilized somewhat. But that's how, on a we're in a very tippy area, and small changes in small regions on mining, for example, could change costs and pricing and things like that radically. So China has this objective of controlling, even within their Silk Road idea, the routes of commerce over land to get to Europe, to get to other locations to sell their goods and to do commerce, and to control those routes, and then control the key locations for extraction of raw resources. A next generation or generations variation of what the Brits did by controlling the key trade routes and the harbors, the cities, and building them up in those key areas. And by the way, the British way of doing things is divide and conquer. So they'd always have 3 or 4 groups in an area that they would put in close proximity, keep them at each other's throats, and one was always rising up, the other 2 were trying to work it out. As soon as those 2 pick one of the sides that wants to join, then there's a third man out. It's a different one. They keep doing this round stuff, and so you'll go to places where they've been, like Syria or Iraq, and you got 3 different groups there primarily, and they're all constantly fighting each other, and somebody's coming in having to settle it down. That's the same thing here in South Africa with different of the tribal groups, and they're constantly aiding one and tamping down another, and then another one rises up, and they keep doing this roundy round to keep the country from being stable, if you will. Same thing up in Rhodesia. Rhodesia was one of the most stable countries in Africa. It was the Pearl of Africa in its own way. We call Uganda the Pearl of Africa, but Rhodesia was really this amazing area. And then as soon as they declared their statehood, the mischief came in. And from the viewpoint here in South Africa, and one of the people that was here today that I spent quite a bit of time with grew up in Rhodesia, and in that whole era, and said, no, there was no question. The people that messed it up, he didn't use that word, he was a bit more flowery, were the Brits. And they wanted it. It suited them for the broader region, what they want. If you wanted to say what is at the heart of a lot of this problem.
Yeah, it seems like the
secret societies out of England as being the core.
Yeah, it seems like the Brits, they like
go ahead.
Divide and conquer. I had Sheila Holm on a couple of days ago, and we talked about some of this, where the United States has been like the old, British Empire, going in and conquering. You go to World War I, World War II, all around the world, where we come in and conquer, and then we come in and build those countries back up, and we never get the benefit of that. So, and it seems like
they use us like their army, and then it's our blood, our guts, our machinery, our technology, and then they'll sift their way back in to take advantage of it. Yeah.
So it looks like we may be moving in a more higher calling direction, trying to help these countries.
Well, I don't think we can do much to help most of these places right now. America coming in, I will tell you this, here in this area of South Africa, all eyes are on the U.S. and President Trump. And they are praying, wishing, hoping that we could come in and help them against this, you know, group that has hijacked their country. And by the way, just so everybody understands more precisely, elections, the election integrity, it's broadly understood in all these countries across Africa, but especially here in South Africa, that the group that got into power here got in through election fraud. And they were a 0.5% from having a 2/3 vote majority where they could have changed the Constitution. They won power and got into power, 25 years ago, and more, 30 years ago. But when they got in, they were just a hair shy of enough to change the Constitution. Had they gotten just that little bit more, everybody here is like, it'd have been the night of the long knives. They'd have been out slaughtering everybody. But they didn't quite have that ability, so they had to work within the law to do a lot of the stuff that they're doing. And they've legislated essentially people out of their houses and homes and just taxed them to death to steal it all.
Yeah.
And those that are in power right now for their families and like that. And it's just been a transfer of wealth into these groups, the ANC groups that are here. What they're hoping is that the U.S. Somehow helps them to get to even fair elections. See, all the election observers that have come in to certify that the elections are fair here, those election observers themselves keep calling elections fair, and everybody's going, what are you talking about, a fair election? It's insane. You know that they had power outages that conveniently started as soon as the vote's done. A few hours later, they're counting. They have a power outage, and the power doesn't come on till the next afternoon. All of a sudden, the votes are completely changed from where they're going. And people get into power and going, how did that guy win? Nobody even knew his name. It's very clear that they haven't had fair elections here for a very, very long time. And
yeah,
so
I think all the way back to Nelson Mandela. There's a lot of people talk about this, that was a basically captured operation. It wasn't about, overcoming apartheid. It was basically the opposite. So, they, blacks claim that, the whites were mistreating them, but now the blacks are mistreating the whites. And like you're talking about, the election unintegrity was huge in that time frame, and it looks like it's something that needs to be fixed around the world.
Well, a lot of the folks, and I had the benefit of having other people from other countries in the region here. They actually, are of a mind, and not just whites, if you will, blacks and coloreds, are in agreement. Hollywood played a huge part in shaping the perceptions of what was really going on. And they're actually very disturbed by the way Hollywood projects out a lot of the information, because it doesn't actually fit what actually happened. For example, Mandela, he's worshipped practically in democratic circles and many of the countries out there. But the people here, there's no question in their mind, this is, the people that have followed in his footsteps and what he's done have been murderous and bloodthirsty in the way that they have moved forward. And they want to have it, claim it's a tit for tat or something like that. Certainly in this region where I'm at, the people here, the ones that want to break away from South Africa amongst the colored community, it's an overwhelming majority. It's in the 90th percentile. Of the blacks, as you would say it here, the number is still over 50% of the population. They don't want anything to do with what's going on further north. It's such a horror and an embarrassment. And so there's quite a bit of unity on how to move forward or what needs to be done. And so, yeah. But, you know, to think about how we in America, our perceptions of what's going on politically, you know, with Obama wanting to do the Civil War movie, a modern Civil War in America, he and Michael. There's propaganda from Hollywood that's affected the way things are going on here in Africa that do not portray the truth of what's really going on, manipulating world opinion against the people here in South Africa, in this Cape region.
So I saw that in one of the generals, McInerney, I believe it was. I saw an interview with him, and he was talking about how they'll probably do some nice, you know, flyovers with F-35s and all kind of stuff. And I just saw that, yeah, they do have B-2s and F-35s are flying overhead, you know, with the Trump-Putin meeting right now. So where I know you have talked about this, and it's almost came to pass a few times about this nuclear standoff. Where do you see that going?
Well, the reason that I've mentioned it is because in America, the shadow government that is the elephant in the room that Cheney talked about. The shadow government really is senior executive service. And senior executive service claims that their mandate, of course, you can go on the Wikipedia, you know, read about senior executive service. Their mission statement is that they provide continuity in government between elected administrations. The continuity that, say, a politician is a 2-year representative or a 4 or 6-year term of office. A lot of these things play out over decades. And so they claim the right to have some control and decisions. They're the ultimate deep state. Politicians come and go, but they keep things on an even keel and make the long-term decisions, enforce longer-term objectives, etc. So they claim the authority to decide when and how to use nuclear weapons if there's problems in you know, elected government and doing that effectively, precisely. Now I'm talking behind the scenes, not what's said within the public side. When Trump left office after his first term, those authorities were not turned over to Biden. And that's something that people will be arguing and debating over decades to come. I'm just telling you, it didn't happen. And when Trump left the White House on January 20th, 2021, he was still president. When he got on the helicopter, he was still president. When he got on Air Force One, he was still president and commander-in-chief when he landed in Florida and went all the way to Mar-a-Lago. And so the briefcase traveled with him and has to be within 2 doors of the president at all times. And when Biden on another unit was read in, he did not have the codes. The biscuit wasn't passed to him. He was recognized as the elected president of the United States, with some questions over the legitimacy of that election. And there was a military review done for 50 days, 45 plus 5 days between the services afterwards. And never did Biden have his finger on the nuclear key and anything would have happened. He might have been able to push the button, but it would not have been recognized at the launch control locations. And so the question is, who had that authority? And because Trump never handed off the baton, because of things that happened in the 50s as nuclear systems came online, and the 54 code, in the way that power is passed, the idea being that, you know, you could have space aliens, you could have doppelgangers, situations existed where there may be some question as to whether or not the person even, you know, purporting to be the president was truly the real person. Sci-fi movies and things like that, there were certain protocols put in place that did not allow that Trump could convey those authorities. When they invaded Mar-a-Lago and went through everything and turned everything upside down, looking, what were they looking for? Some said the Blue Book, which had all of the stuff from Crossfire Hurricane. Others, you know, some pages on nuclear secrets that were, you know, related to other countries that Trump shouldn't have. The reality is they were looking for the biscuit. And Trump actually told you that last summer during the campaign when somebody raised something. He says, what, you think I was going to leave the nuclear launch codes in a teenager's video game drawer? Are you kidding me? Referring to Hunter, to Barron. He told you what they were looking for. They were looking for the launch codes for the biscuit. And then, of course, Trump, the biscuit has to be on your physical body, person, or within arm's reach at all times. The president, commander-in-chief, could not hand the biscuit off to Melania, couldn't hand it off to the head of his security detail, Secret Service. He couldn't give it or convey it to anyone. Had to be on his physical body or within arm's reach at all times. And can't be conveyed to anybody. And so what I've told your audience and others is that what Trump did, he declared national emergency March 13th, 2020. March 15th, 2020, he went to Cheyenne Mountain, did a walkthrough, the underground nuclear base in the mountain there in Colorado. And then at the conclusion of it, he sealed up the base. There's all sorts of stuff where, yes, the outer door is open, but the inner door isn't. They've continued to maintain the base in a lockdown condition internally. It's classified, all the stuff related to it. You know, a bunch of people, I know Bifford, I've been there, have you been there, blah, whatever. The short version is the only place the biscuit could be other than the president's person or within arm's reach is where the codes already existed on the other half at Cheyenne Mountain. He turned those in there, and then those codes were locked in place. They were never changed. Trump memorized the biscuit, everything in there. And that's why after Trump left office in 2021, a couple months later, he had this medical check where they also tested his memory, and he aced everything, including his memory. What was that for? For the benefit of the people in the mountain. He hasn't forgotten anything. He knows all the codes, and he's the de facto authority should there be a nuclear emergency. In the case of a nuclear emergency, like what happened in Hawaii, if a lot of people have forgotten this, you had a message went out on cell phones, and the sirens went off all over Hawaii. And on the cell phones, the message was a missile launch has been detected. Intercontinental ballistic missile launch has been detected and is headed for Hawaii. So everybody bend over, kiss your ass goodbye. You know, people for an hour were believing that a nuclear bomb was headed for Hawaii, going to blow up, probably in Pearl Harbor. And it was very traumatizing for everybody in Hawaii. That was, especially as you got closer to that location. Although there's locations on other the islands that could be hit, Maui being one of them precisely. And but in reality, how many nuclear bombs blew up in Hawaii that day? None. The alarms went off just before an hour had gone by. Said some guy bumped a light switch with his elbow in an office he'd worked in for years and accidentally turned on the alarms, and the codes went out to cell phones. Complete, total rubbish bullshit. But what else happened during that time period? All of the computer systems, including military systems and federal three-letter agency systems that monitor communications across Asia into China, all of the South Pacific region. All of those servers, all of those computer systems on an emergency basis scrammed. They went into an emergency mode and turned off other functions and began sending all the data they had in their data banks back to the mainland. And it was stored in computers within the NORAD system. That was done twice, so that any information that developed even after this launch announcement was also sent, plus also a guarantee if there was anything that didn't go through right. And one of the key features there is that the assumption when everything was downloaded, because it's believed, that Hawaii could be destroyed, key systems could be destroyed in a nuclear attack. So that data, which would be critical to, for mounting a defense, to doing offense, military, anything, is back at the mainland. But it's assumed that maybe like SAP programs, special access projects, where only a handful of people or even just one person may have the access to information storage activities, etc. That information, the person who generated it could be dead, yet it could have critical national security information that we need as a country to have. So in this download, the access codes go with the information when it scrams. So imagine that projects that are completely isolated, top secret, nobody's supposed to know about it, those programs, the access codes to access that information are sent with it. Now, if you have something that happened in the mainland across the rest of America with a nuclear attack, the systems all through the federal system, including military and defense, and the spy systems, intelligence, etc., they would also scram to protect that information, and it would go into the NORAD security system and data system with the access codes. Look at what's going on right now with all these special projects that are being revealed that the intelligence people, Brennan and others, were all involved in. Comey running secret operations at FBI. Do they have data? Do they have programs? Do they have information that is secreted? And if you get into a nuclear emergency, you might not have missiles go off in America, but the context is that it could be happening, and those systems would download. When Trump sealed everything up on March 15th, 2020, that's never been unlocked since. So the codes are all still in place, and it could scram, and we'd have access to everything, and that's part of the question.
Wow.
Give me just a moment. I have an emergency call coming in. Just give me about 2 minutes here. I'll call you, or I'll come right back on. Stay on here, and I'll be right back.
Okay. So this kind of leads into, these guys probably knew long term, how this was going to work out, war gamed it and so forth. So they're holding the codes. They knew that they couldn't give it to the bad guys, Biden administration, whatever, because that's basically deep state. So we've talked about how military, and Juan has talked about how military, it's going to be up to the military. And we're starting to see that happening now in DC. We've seen it in LA. We see it along the border. So the military is involved. They're slowly starting to move in and start to occupy these cities. So there'll probably be other ones that they're going to go into. In New Mexico, They're having problems there, and the governor there is talking about drug problem situation she's got going on there. So is she in cahoots, or is she just, wanting more money to flow her way? It sounds like we're probably going to get some of these Democrat governors and mayors to basically play on our side. So it's very, very interesting how it's all starting to make sense. Long-term gaming for all of this, looking for the nuclear, devices that are all over the place, like in South Africa, like he's talking about. He's there. Every time Juan goes to a certain area, he's not the only one there. There's lots of coordination that's going on when he shows up in some of these areas. All right, so we've seen a lot of this stuff. We're starting to move in the direction. I think the military moving into some of these cities is a preemptive move before these cities start to go down. I always thought the cities were going to go crazy. The Democrats going to run to them and so forth. Deep state, like we saw with the Democrats from Texas running to Illinois, Chicago, and New York. So we're probably going to see at some point a lot of these Democrats hole up in some of these big cities we've talked about. So the military trying to start to move in, like we're starting to see, as a preemptive thing. What are your thoughts on that, Juan?
Well, you're going to have this doesn't get solved with police or courts within the justice system. The criminal activity that's occurred is treasonous, it's traitorous. What you're hearing about with Brennan, Obama, Comey, many others, Hillary, these activities obstructed the way that America interacts with the world and allowed for things to develop in ways that have caused millions of lives. Think about Ukraine. Trump would not have allowed Ukraine and that whole war to happen. It just wouldn't have happened. In fact, there's a lot of things that were going on behind the scenes that Trump was doing to negate things that were happening in the Ukraine, and he was obstructed in that. Remember, while Trump was in office, things were coming out about the money laundering going through Ukraine. The work with the IMF. IMF said it spent $1 billion a year for 10 years fomenting the color revolution in Ukraine long before Trump got there, setting it up for war. In Ukraine, you've had about 1.5 million Russian and 1.5 million Ukrainian lives lost, not just military, but civilian. And just all the destruction, it's going to cost, depending on who you talk to, somewhere between, on the low side, $1 trillion. Other people say now it's going to cost 10 trillion to rebuild Ukraine. Remember, you have a lot of depleted uranium weapons that have been used. And so everywhere that those kind of munitions have been used, there's radioactive material in those different spots. You can't live there. You can't farm there. You can't do a business there. You're going to have to go back and map every one of those locations, or you'll have people dying of cancer and everything else from that for, next 100 years. So there's a lot of work to be done to get Ukraine usable again. That that activity that thwarted Trump from governing as the elected leader of the United States was treasonous. That's not something you go to a jury, a civilian jury, and have them hear all the details. You go to a tribunal because this was an action against the commander-in-chief. And so those people ultimately, when they're finally arrested, There may be a little dance with Justice Department to begin with, but they will be tried in a military court for treason and get the sentence based on treason.
Yeah, it seems to be coming to a head pretty quick. I think in the fall, we'll start to see some activity. What do you think?
Well, you've got Hillary testifying last in a group that starts mid-September, where they're being interviewed or grilled, whatever, Congress. And Hillary gets her deposition interview on the 16th of October. And she's the last of the group related to the Russia stuff. Because that really did start with Hillary and her campaign back in 2015 to come up with a plan to thwart Trump on his way, to the election. And so Hillary will be the last one. They'll hit everybody else moving to the center of the whole thing, which is Hillary. And then sometime shortly thereafter, as the public has had a chance to hear the testimony of the various people, hear people being grilled, evidence being presented in the open, and them being asked about it, then they can move towards arrest. And if you think about it, we know the government entities involved know what Hillary's actually guilty of and was involved in. And all these other players, Brennan, Comey, other names that you may not recognize as much up on the top of the list, but are very there. And so it'll be tuning the public up and preparing the public for what has to happen next. The saying that I've used many times with your audience here, those whom the gods would destroy, they must first villainize. You have to bring the public along. You can't do this in a vacuum because these are such high-profile people within the public political areas. It can't be looked at as merely a political prosecution for Trump's gain, okay? Their opponent. This isn't a boxing match. This was life and death for the nation. And they tried to do a coup to steal control of America and hold it on falsehoods. And it wasn't just a coup with a few dollars or, who gets to be class president or something like that. This was a coup using military-grade assets. People in the spy intelligence realm were weaponized to take out a political opponent. And then even tools of the military were used to maintain certain illusions and control, going back, for example, to the death of Loretta Fuddy in this staged plane crash in Hawaii, where over at Molokai, where the woman who released the birth certificate dies in the plane crash, the sole person that was killed in this plane crash, allegedly. She didn't die in the crash. She died supposedly drowned afterwards. That was military assets that were used to assist in staging that accident.
Wow.
Military aircraft over the area controlling all the communications, a submarine, a mini sub, divers. Now the divers weren't U.S. They were actually from other locations, but the equipment that brought them in and took them out, along with Loretta, out to the ship, those were U.S. Navy and intelligence agency assets that were used in that whole charade. And even Loretta Fuddy isn't who you think she is. She was the woman that you heard was Obama's mom, Stanley Ann Dunham. Stanley Ann Dunham is not Obama's mom. She just had the baby as a prop in this whole stage play down to Indonesia, with the work she was doing for USAID. Obama father was an American, mother was an Indonesian girl, and nothing to do with Kenya. So he was born at the Peace Arch Hospital up in Vancouver, BC. So the whole story, everything that you know, is a militarized lie in the intelligence community. Use of these various assets to control how you will think and to bend your perception of reality. And then all the way up through what Hillary and crew did with the dossier, the creation of it, the people that did it, the law firm involved, Perkins Coie and people there. And then they continued their mischief even after Trump won the presidency to stop Trump from being able to govern by using those lies to interfere with the proper operation of Trump in the presidency as the commander in chief. And then to do the work to steal the 2020 election in collusion with foreign operators, including China. For example, Brennan, the building that was used that was housing the servers in Serbia, where the actual number crunching was done by these Venezuelan operators with Cuban supervision, Chinese assistance supervision. That building is half owned by Brennan. Okay, the head of the CIA legally owns the part of the property that this whole operation was based on, and that's not treason to have participated owning the building and the servers that were used to steal the election 2020. And then as a result of that, you get a guy in who, because of the way that or other people, Biden wasn't running it, he's just a figurehead, he's just a puppet. This shadow government was running it. Wasn't even Brennan or Comey or Obama. It was people behind the scenes over at SES that were running it. They cost millions of lives by the way that they handled things. Millions of lives. Millions. That's not a hangable offense. Which part of that, any one of the things I just described to you are hangable offenses. All the players involved, hanging's too good for them, literally, for what they have cost on the planet to humanity with their actions. And all of that, everything there is going to be on the table over the next many years. Because even once the arrests happen on the Russia stuff, we're going to mature from that to the 2020 election stuff, 2022, 2024, and the interference there. And more people are going to go away, and they're not going into the justice system. They're going into military tribunals and trials.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how much of this rogue or deep state military has been taken out? I know President Trump took out a lot of them when he was in office last time, the leadership. How's it looking these days?
Well, remember, and these intervening years since President Trump left, his first term in office, a lot of people would like to think that we could have just taken the information we had and prosecuted and thrown people in jail and stuff. But a lot of what has happened had to mature. You had to have time for it to play out, see all the players involved. And in order to, and it's playing chicken at 100 miles an hour, 59 Chev versus 59 Ford, right? Whoever, when you hit, nobody survives type of thing. were in a very precarious situation, but you had to let these people play through and show who they really are. And now what we're doing is we're kind of swerving out of the way, hoping those guys roll over and we stay intact as we get to this moment. You know, Trump hasn't gotten, he's got over 150 appointees that Congress still has to vote on, the Senate still has to vote on in order for them to take their positions in government. That's the most in 125 years that has ever happened in any administration over all that time, and Congress isn't voting on them. They're slow walking them. So Trump's not fully in control at all yet. And then the people in those agencies that the new appointees would hire, they're not on the payroll yet either. So you have, you know, all sorts of agencies of government who are literally in limp mode. And they're functional, but they're not really operating very well. Justice Department, where you expect a bunch of stuff done by Pam Bondi, it's like under 50% manned right now. And same thing at FBI. You have a lot of people leaving, and some fired, some took early out, some know that they'd get gotten pretty soon. So they've like gone away, but they haven't been able to rehire the people to replace them yet. And, you know, a lot of these positions, it takes time, even after you get there, even if you're the right person with training and history like that, to kind of come up to speed. So we're still in a very early stage of Trump. We're still clearing the decks of all the debris of, you know, people that are not favorable to Trump. Look at what happened the other day over in the Justice Department. Pam Bondi fired one of the Justice Department employees because he threw a sandwich at one of the Trump people because they didn't want the Trump people around doing ICE people getting rid of foreigners that were not supposed to be here. And so this guy is so upset that a member of ICE is in the room that he's in. He throws a Subway sandwich at him, okay? Immature. Bondi had to fire him. Well, you still got a lot of employees like that in these various agencies that hate Trump, hate everything to do with Trump.
That's a real good Trump. That's a good point, because we want them to, like, you know, come in and make all these changes right away, but they're in a sea of, you know, swamp of all these people that have been put in position, like the, you know, executive service group and all that kind
Senior
of stuff.
executive service, yeah.
Executive service, yeah. So
well, remember, Trump cut off the money supply to a lot of these different agencies that were really working at cross purposes for the country. The best example, but it was numerous agencies, is USAID. But remember, he also cut off the money and shut down National Public Broadcasting.
Yep.
The whole enterprise was anti-American and absolutely anti-Trump, and yet it's a, you know, pseudo-public agency. All that money, he's still working to get rid of these enemies that are operating within. In the State Department, oh my gosh, you know, Rubio's doing all this work, but one of the stories that I heard yesterday related to stuff going on here in South Africa, even after Trump pantsed the president here on his bullshit, did it in the Oval Office there. You know, think of the guts, by the way. President Trump, there's all the pomp and circumstance. The president of South Africa and all his entourage come to Washington, D.C. The plane ride up, we're going to get Trump to do this, and we're going to ask for that, and they're going to have to give us this and that because, you know, we've got all this stuff going on here. We got the rare earth minerals, and we got the ports, and, you know, we're this key place that if if anything happens in the Mideast, all the boats have to come around here and refuel and all that. We're in great shape. We're just going to show that Trump, he's going to kiss our ass. And they get in there and they're all ready to talk about tariffs and trade agreements and everything else. And Trump, literally, like one of the Harlem Globetrotters, okay? I don't even know which one. All of them are capable of it. He does this dance move and pantses the president of South Africa right there in front of the whole world. He wants everybody in the room to see it. You tolerate, you encourage the massacring of hundreds of people a day, and you want us to trade with you? We're supposed to just drop any, we're not supposed to look at these horrors happening in plain sight. You've been in office all this time, and you encourage people to massacre other humans all across your country, 100 a day. They don't just shoot them in the head. They don't just shoot them in the heart. They do things to them that are not even talkable. Okay. One of the stories of one of the people of a relative of his that had a large ranch up in one of the areas, and what they did to this relative is so gruesome. I don't even want to tell you. But once you understand that, Trump has a value system. It starts with stop the killing everywhere in the world. Stop feeding the demons. Stop feeding the devil his blood sacrifice, his adrenochrome, done by 1,000 different ways all over the world every day. Thousands of different ways. Stop the bloodletting. That's all he asked Zelensky. Zelensky's there in the same Oval Office. What did he do? He had an agreement to do a ceasefire and then work out a peace arrangement with Putin. Zelensky came to the Oval Office with the understanding that was the entire point for him showing up at the Oval Office was to sign a ceasefire. Trump was going to be there in the room to help moderate this. Putin does a ceasefire. We stop the killing, and we'll start working out the negotiations, what a proper peace deal would look like. And America's willing to Trump's willing to sign for America that will help Ukraine to extract rare earth materials and rebuild their industry and their system so that they could make the money they needed to rebuild the country. That's what Trump's terms were. Zelensky came in agreeing that. He talks to a few other NATO members, including England, a couple of people that are with the other camp in the State Department and Department of Defense in the U.S. that hate Trump, and decides not to sign the agreement at the last second to stop the killing, to just do a ceasefire and let's figure it out. In the meantime, nobody's killing anybody on either side. No more feeding the demons. Zelensky says, no, I've decided I'm not going to do the ceasefire. Since then till today, at a rate of 1,000 to 1,500 people a day on both sides dying. Think of that. In the intervening 3+ months since Zelensky refused to the ceasefire, how many people have died on both sides that Trump was trying to stop, and then we'll work the peace deal? And it just goes on and all the destruction. That's what Trump's trying to do. The same thing was in play when he did what he did here with South Africa to stop the killing. And because people are dying 100 a day, 100 a day, 100 a day, every one of them a horror story. And Trump just wants to stop it. That's what's in play for all over the world, other places too. He's trying to stop the killing worldwide, stop the wars. Let's write it. Even Putin acknowledged that Trump, his heart was in the right place to try and stop the killing. And that's where Trump's at. That's his marker. We can do all the other deals. We can talk everything else. First, stop the killing. I don't want to negotiate while people are being slaughtered.
I totally agree. Now we can look at California and see a lot of similarities between South Africa and California. A lot of people would say, well, they're not killing, but then we look at the directed injury weapon attacks that have been happening in communities throughout California, and then of course the flood of illegal aliens, and a lot of these people are criminals that are killing people in California as well. So I would argue that some of these states and some of these communities are definitely doing this exact thing that South Africa is doing.
Well, let me just add this. Let's have what I think is an important and honest conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Here in South Africa, it's a land grab.
Mm-hmm.
The people running the country now that got there through election fraud, they did not ever win one election here legitimately. The same people that stole the election in America 2020 and tried to do it for 2024, the exact same people, when you hear how they've engineered the vote here in South Africa, it's one of the 71 countries outside of the United States where the vote was stolen by the same players, China fully involved. So they do not have a representative government. They're in power through election fraud here. And by the way, Mark Cook, who's a member of my team, he was raised several times in the conversations over the last couple of days because he's a well-known entity here and in what they're going to have to do when they do the exit from the rest of South Africa, if they pull it off, how they'll run their elections moving forward, the hand count paper ballot. But think about it, through election fraud, and then the people getting into power are trying to steal the lands from the legitimate owners, and they have a thuggish force that's going out and doing murders every day to terrorize the white and the mixed or coloreds, as they call them here, people, to push them off the land so only the blacks can have these lands across Africa, even if you're mixed, in other words, interracial marriages and things like that over the generations. Oh, well, then you don't qualify, even for this group that's running the country. They're just stealing the land and they want it for themselves for their own purposes, okay? And they don't run it, the farms, when they get them, they go into dysfunction almost immediately. They don't know how to run them. They haven't got a clue. But now go to Southern California. It's going to come out. It's only a matter of time. Everybody knows what the real deal was. They wanted to build their railway from San Francisco to Los Angeles. So it was going to terminate right there in the Paradise area and then spread out to the rest of their regional railway. And anybody that was in the way just needed to be taken out of the way. And those properties, look, they've already started. They want to build the high density, low income housing in some of the most valuable real estate in the world, and just like Nero burning Rome, so that he could rebuild it in his image. And these high priests whispering in his ear, if you burn Rome down, nobody will remember the other Caesars or their accomplishments. Rome will be you. It'll be your image everywhere. You'll get credit for it. You'll be remembered, 1,000 years from now, because you rebuilt Rome in your image. That's the way they look at the Palisades. These people are in power, but along the way, the graft, the money that they were going to make, the bonds they're going to be issued. Oh, wait till we are on a path. The guys that I'm working with behind the scenes on the bond stuff in California, oh my gosh, when you realize what's happened in California over bonds, that's coming. And of course, that was part of this whole scam. But all of those people that died in Southern California and had their property taken, they were just a speed bump to accomplish what these people wanted to do and the money grab you know, how many billions have gone into that railway thing and they haven't put a rail down yet? It's just a scam to steal money from the people. Go look at Maui, same thing. How many people, how many children died in Maui so that somebody could build their 15-minute city demonstrator to show the world how beautiful and how well run and how intelligent our new city run on, you know, batteries charged by space aliens or whatever. We can run the city. We're going to reinvent Lahaina, and it'll be so beautiful, and everybody will come here to see the rebirth of Lahaina in our new image. You know, they burned down Lahaina like Nero burned down Rome, and it's clear that in these cases, military grade weapons, directed energy weapons, were used. How are you going to have the FBI or any agency at Homeland Security investigate Maui, Paradise, the Palisades, or any of 100+ more fires that happen around the country that you haven't heard the name of, the word of, but where the same directed energy weapons were used for fires where they wanted to do mining of certain materials, surface mining, etc., where certain companies that were friends of the administration, Biden, the Obamas, etc., back to the Clintons even, they're doing a little favor for a friend to help them have the wealth, the resources, the power moving forward. I mean, even you go back to the bird refuge in Oregon, Uranium One was right in the middle of all of that mischief. Same thing with the Chinese and the areas down there with the Bundy family in Nevada. There was 150 ranchers running cattle in those areas, several 100,000 acres, and it was down to one left, the Bundys. And they wanted to push them off so the land could be put over to BLM, Bureau of Land Management, and then leased to foreign operators, China primarily. Okay, and by the way, what are they trying to do up here in South Africa? It's China that wants to come in and run these farms they're running people off of because they can't run them locally. And so, in a very similar manner, they are taking lives as part of a land grab here in Africa. They are taking lives as part of a land grab in Southern California and in Lahaina and in other locations around the country. It's actually exactly the same. You just nailed it. Do you see that? Do you see? Am I off base, or do you see it the same way?
That's incredible the way you put that together. Absolutely a land grab.
And with murder in the most heinous ways.
Yeah.
You know, here they do it a type of terroristic murder, but how terroristic and murderous was it to do what happened there in Southern California? And by the way, anybody questions about that? Here's an important detail. We have the satellite surveillance systems that we're monitoring beautiful, intelligent people that monitor these things know what they're looking at, or at least had a clue. They monitored aircraft on the west side of Area 51 over the secure area within the borders of Area 51. Aircraft that were spraying material that then you could also see in the satellite imagery that these people were collecting in the days before the fire in Southern California with the Paradise, that they were spraying material, you know, this long streams, you know, 30, 40, 50 miles long. Mm-hmm. Aircraft would spray it. It's in an aerosolized kind of a form. Then they go back up and they come back and spray it again. And then certain types of SDI, Strategic Defense Initiative, developed weather control and weapons systems. Very high-tech stuff. from inside the test range area and the secure area of Area 51 were turned on and created this weather wind pattern that pushed that material from west or east to west. Now, normally wind flow in that part of the world goes from west to east. So it comes off the Pacific Ocean, comes inland, goes over the mountains and off into the desert and across the country. In the fall, September, October, you'll get a situation where we get a reverse of that. And you'll have an airflow that goes from east to west, and from east to west off the coast. But it's only during a certain season.
Mhm.
And this was in January when this happened. And so it was very unseasonable that the weather pattern was blowing from out at the desert and out to the coast. When Jen and I landed in LAX that morning before the fire started, we saw that Biden's short bus, Air Force One, was sitting on the ground there, and not the 747. And I thought, well, that's unusual. And we landed from west to east, which is not the normal way. You land into the wind. Well, the wind was coming off the desert, and it was pretty high winds. They had 80-mile-an-hour winds at times in the days before, which is, unusual. You get, 30, 40 mile-an-hour winds in these Santa Anas, but you don't usually get it super high. These were way higher. And then the air wasn't hot. In a normal Santa Ana, the air is very warm. I remember going up, above Montecito where I lived, into the mountains at night, put the top down and drive up there. I just stand up there and just watching the stars and enjoying the night air. And it'd be 80, 85 degrees. It was so warm and comfortable. I loved the fall Santa Anas. It's one of my favorite times of the year. And to drive up into the mountains up behind Montecito and Santa Barbara. These were cool air because the air wasn't being heated. It was being artificially moved. It had nothing to do with the normal hot, cold air movement of a Santa Ana because it was artificial. And then what was being sprayed was silver oxide. Same thing used to seed clouds to cause it to, rain out or seed fog over runways to clear out the fog off the runway in the old days where it started. And it would leave a little, almost like an oily sheen on the swimming pools. So people noticed this silver oxide in the area. The thing about the silver oxide is that using certain other types of systems, HARP type systems, you could then change the charge state of the air, the atmosphere over certain areas with exacting precision, literally down to a couple of blocks, and cause this silver oxide to fall on target exactly where you wanted it to. And so that silver oxide was pumped into the LA basin on the north side and then was literally just falling on the vegetation and the buildings and the grass and everything else where the fires got going. And silver oxide, it wicks the moisture out of plants, dries them out. And so that's one effect of silver oxide on vegetation. The other thing is once it goes to flame, it'll cause a fire to burn hotter than normal. And so with greater intensity. So the guys that tracked the spraying over Area 51 only first detected it, I think, about 10 days before the fires in LA. It could have been going on longer. We just didn't realize. Was commensurate with when the wind stuff, these Santa Anas began, and then kept getting higher and higher. So probably close to accurate on that. On that, the reason I went into that whole long diatribe is because there should be zero question in anyone's mind that military assets were used before Biden left office to start and accelerate. Silver oxide essentially acts like an accelerant in a fire. Every fire person out there knows, throw gasoline on the spot and you got a hotter, more intense fire. It's an accelerant, okay? Or any of these other materials. This material was put over that area of LA. That was accelerants that were put there from a secure military facility using military aircraft and or lanes that are reserved. Nobody gets to fly in there. You don't fly in there in your private aircraft. Nobody moves over the controlled airspace above Area 51 that the military hasn't approved being there. You'll get a fighter escort out of the area or out of this world if you don't comply. And so that was totally authorized. Somebody had to have the authority within the military at the highest levels to do that. Where did they get that authority? On whose authority was silver oxide being sprayed over Area 51, number one? And on whose authority were SDI weather control systems and tools used for war used to push those materials in over LA? Who paid for the silver oxide alone, let alone the crews, the aircraft, the fuel for the aircraft, and then the electricity to run those huge systems, pumping the air to move that into the LA basin. And then who was running the HARP systems? Were they local? Were they mobile? Or were they from other locations around the world? We have quite a few of them, it's not just Alaska, to hit that area and cause those materials to come out of suspension in the atmosphere right exactly where the fires were. At the end of the day, the only way we're going to get to the truth of LA, also North Carolina, Lahaina, the only way we're going to get to the truth of that, the president, the commander-in-chief, is going to have to authorize a investigative commission with access to all of these military tools in a secure situation, because they're all very classified technologies, operations, etc., to get into the log books, everything else. President Trump is going to have a presidential commission to look at all of that, and probably needs to go back and look at 9/11 on the same basis, because that was not everything that happened there was unnatural. Steel buildings don't come down based on kerosene burning in the building from aircraft. So
yeah, I think Tulsi Gabbard is going to be really key in a lot of this. Now, something is strange about that 9/11 stuff. Now, we a lot of us in the truth community, if you will, talk about 9/11 very openly, but you never hear politicians or anyone in the media or anyone really in positions of power anywhere talk about 9/11. What is the big squeeze on that information coming out from all these people?
You know, one of the funniest stories, I don't mean funny, humorous, wild, oddball stories, is first off, I personally, I know this is not an agreed upon thing within most of the community on the 9/11 stuff, but I'm fairly comfortable at this point that no aircraft struck those buildings, that it was a holographic projection for various reasons. I'm very comfortable on the tech and everything else that that's exactly what happened, that the buildings were wired, that there was the thing about 9/11, it was so crucial. There could be no single point failure. No matter what those buildings had to come down that day. So there was thermite that was put in the buildings, painted into the buildings after the bombing done back in the early 90s. And they came in and redid those buildings. Certainly Building 7. There is zero explanation, none at all, how Building 7 could come down related to anything to do with the two aircraft. And it was clearly a demolition, 50-story building. You know, for a lot of people out there, we're around buildings all the time, you see all that stuff. A 50-story building it's almost unimaginable how big, how complex the structure is in a 50-story building. And that building free fell down. There was no hitches on the way down. It just went to nothing. Okay. Think about you interview people that talk about exotic technologies that came from the aliens and everything else. Okay. You've had those conversations. Okay. If Building 7 wasn't wired, which it was, it was a demolition. But in the case of all three buildings, they still, even if you had a demolition with the squibs going off and shape charges, explosives in key locations, you know, when you prepare a building to bring it down, they also remove key supports. They drill things out. There's a lot of demolition work that's done before you ever place the charges to bring a building down. Okay. How much of that would even have been possible at buildings that were, you know, occupied, heavily occupied? And even if you only did it on certain floors, you didn't do it on every floor. In the way the buildings came down, it's hard to imagine you wouldn't have seen hangups. You see buildings where they let the weight of the building bring certain other areas down, so they'll do key spots and then let the destruction on those floors allow other floors to fold in and come down in a certain way. You don't see that in either of the towers or in Building 7. And so the contention is that some other technology was also involved there, something very advanced. That's why we talk about directed energy weapons. So I think at the end of the day, with Building 7 as a key, you know, question mark all by itself, it will take access to the military systems behind the scenes that are not even acknowledged publicly, and those technologies to get to the bottom of who did what and how. And I will tell you that in 9/11, Senior Executive Service is implicated there also, and that's because they wanted Homeland Security. Remember, Homeland Security was a follow-on from 9/11, not just the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, but Homeland Security. The taking of all of our intelligence agencies, which were compartmentalized and separate. If you wanted to invade our intelligence community, you had 16 different agencies, all isolated, insulated, operated separately. The information from them was brought in through the cabinet, was brought in through the joint chiefs, but they operated independently so that an enemy would have to get spies in every one of them and then coordinate the energy to know everything that was going on. When you put all of them under one roof, Homeland Security, it actually made it easier for our intelligence community to be infiltrated and run. What happened just now over this last decade within the intelligence community, the coordination between FBI, CIA, NSA, National Reconnaissance Office, DEA, all these different agencies, would never have been possible prior to the creation of Homeland Security. That removed all the barriers between the agencies so that they're all controlled from the Office of Director of National Intelligence. When Radcliffe didn't provide the report that Trump required December 18th of 2020 after the 2020 election showing foreign interference, the reason that they were able to coordinate their efforts and not get that to the president or to the other agency heads is because there was a Homeland Security and they were all in collusion and cooperated with each other in stopping that. That would not have been possible the way that it happened prior to the creation of Homeland Security, prior to 9/11.
Wow, that's
so
staggering. Good point. Wow, never occurred to me. But
at the time it was occurring, we all screamed about it. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, you're completely right. So, all right, so you laid it out. So it's definitely an inside job, and probably direct energy weapons used again, along with demolitions and CGI and all kind of crazy stuff. So why? So it's so obvious to everyone there's something wrong about that. Why still don't people talk about it in high levels of government and so forth?
Well, again, you and I know this, and I think your audience knows it, but now we have to articulate it to kind of bring it to the fore. I think it's the media. I think that they control. It's like saying UFO. I saw a UFO. Immediately, over all the years, well, then you're just a conspiracy theorist. There might be something wrong with you. You read The Sun and Inquirer. Your relatives all look, oh, yeah, that's the one. That's the relative. You're the one that is the kook and the nut. Because normal people that have a job, people that, follow the way the machine tells them to think and operate, don't believe in aliens, don't believe in alien technology. So you're a kook and a nut. And then if you believe that those buildings were taken down by elements of our own government, well, you are a kook or a nut, because if it isn't on the media, if CBS, ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC don't say that it was, directed energy weapon, it was, SDI technology, whatever, then it's just not true. Or they'd have said it. If it's not on TV, from one of the trusted sources, from Walter Cronkite, the most trusted man in America. Okay, that's all a ruse. That's all. You've been programmed to believe that. They say it 10 million times. Walter Cronkite, the most trusted man in America. Well, okay, it becomes like, it's just, conspiracy theory. Well, who put that on there? It was CIA. So that you're tagged. You're tagging yourself as soon as you say conspiracy. Oh, it's a theory. Okay, well, it's a very nice theory, but it's stupid. Yeah, you put it in a college paper, you put it in a high school paper, and now you're the kook or the nut. The world's turned upside down. It's wrong. So what we're doing is we're saying, we're speaking truth. Building 7 could not have come down for any reason based on what was given to America and the world on September 11th of 2001. There's no explanation that they can give you that can be accounted for within what was in the media. Can't be done. So, was there a conspiracy? Some kind of a conspiracy exists, and it's not a theory. Then we go to the other locations on that same day. Are you a conspiracy kook when you say that the aircraft were incapable of bringing down the buildings on that day? Well, if you use Building 7 as your marker, you're absolutely correct. Those aircraft can't account for what occurred. because the buildings, the towers came down in the same way, in the same manner as Building 7 did, and it wasn't hit by an aircraft. So aircraft, in a flip of that, can't be accounted for as being responsible, especially when on the physics, the fuel isn't hot enough to melt steel and doesn't account for the observations and video of molten steel flowing out of windows on lower floors. Molten steel flowing like a river out of windows on lower floors. That wasn't aircraft fuel, and that wasn't accountable from the aircraft. That's thermite. That's a directed energy weapon able to turn metal to molten material in moments. That's what we see in Lahaina. That's what we see in the Palisades and Paradise fires. Car wheels melted, glass melted. That you can't get anywhere close to those temperatures, not even in the same world with wood or other accelerants present, the paint or other things in the car, the cloth in the seats, the tires themselves. Impossible. So it had to be something else present in all of these situations, and it's directed energy. And who has authority and access to those very closely guarded military technologies? I'll just tell you, SES controls the components within the military. The one thing they didn't get based on the 54 code was access to the bomb, to the nukes. They didn't get that.
Good thing.
And that's where the fight is at. That's why Trump retained the nuclear codes. And that's why Trump has the high ground in this still. And that's why Trump is the only person authority. You cannot go to Congress and try to get a congressional commission that's capable of going in and looking behind, lifting the hood over at Department of Defense and seeing these directed energy weapons, and then accessing all of the information on how they were used or misused, and then bring it out to the public. The only way you're getting there is a presidential commission. Before Trump's over, Trump said when he ran for office the first time, before I'm done, you will know exactly who brought down these buildings. That's a campaign promise from Trump. I believe that he 1000% fully intends to follow through on that promise to the American people. And he has to, in part, because in saving America, the only way to save America out here is to get control of those people that have their fingers on the buttons on these directed energy weapons, because they're that scary, dangerous, horrible, threat to the world, to our own government.
Mm-hmm.
Will they use it? And that was why I was so concerned at the inauguration for Trump.
Yeah.
That it could not be done out in the open. It had to be done inside. And they did. They moved it inside the Capitol building, where it was not free open sky to some of the satellites and things that can do those things.
Yep. Now, we mentioned, Nero, trying to change the environment, so that he would be popular. But remember, Nero, the Praetorian Guard, basically abandoned him after the Senate determined he was an enemy of the state. And then he ran for his life, chased by the military. And then
Thank God.
Took his own life. Yeah. So we're going to start to see a lot of that, I think, coming soon.
I think that's an important follow-on. I might have to redo another article on that, because I actually thought about that years ago because I wrote about Nero in one of the articles that I've done, and what he did in burning down Rome, and the follow-on at the end of his life is very much like this moment right now. You're so right. I'm glad you mentioned that, because it was the military that had to save Rome from any further destruction. And by the way, it wasn't just Nero. It was the high priests around Nero, because
Wow.
Nero was actually an idiot. Um, uh, you know, he had these advisors that were whispering in his ear, and
Sounds like Biden.
the high priests around him, etc. And those advisors also had to run for their lives. Some of them survived. Most of them got taken out. But think of all the people around Hillary, around Bill, around the Obamas, around the Bushes, by the way, that were in on this whole scam, this whole operation, including the use of directed energy weapons, military equipment. Remember, they had to stage the entire thing, and military equipment and personnel were used to stage the death of Loretta Fuddy. And by the way, here's another thing. Because we have an audience that were in that particular crowd. Nobody in this audience has permission to forget extortion 17.
Thank you.
That whole ruse about Osama bin Laden there in Pakistan, and we got to go get him. When was that done? It was done 5 days after the birth certificate was released. Okay, people got all looking at it. They're counting the dots and the pixels and everything else, and the country was looking at this birth certificate. So to take the birth certificate off the front page, they had to have something spectacular. Well, they kept Osama bin Laden, that whole storyline, in play for years, and that became the moment to play the Osama bin Laden card, and then send the guys in there to go supposedly get him, and the whole schmear. I don't believe a word of it, and most of the guys I run with don't believe a word of it. It was all made for the public to take our eyes off. But then those SEAL teams that were involved in that were all loaded on the oldest, clunkiest school bus helicopter that you can imagine. And you have to understand, some of the guys talk about the helicopters, these ghost ships that they have available to the teams. They're like alien technology. No man could build this stuff, okay? It's so stunning. It's so amazing. It's so out of this world, okay? And they have these special helicopters that are just for the SEAL teams, that are just, they can park them in the air, unload guys with exacting precision with inches to spare. And it's just, probably ought to get, if you haven't already, any of the guys that have kind of come out openly and talked a little bit about that, and just hear what these machines are like. They're just out of this world. Mm-hmm. But instead of putting them on that, they have everybody run out and get on this antiquated, prehistoric, I wouldn't even use it as a museum piece in my own car museum, helicopter. And they fly out here in Afghanistan. And the guys, many of them told family members that they were concerned, but they couldn't talk about it, etc. They knew something was wrong while they were home before they got redeployed. They get over to Afghanistan, they stuff them all in the helicopter, go out, and they get shot out of the sky. They're all dead. Why? Because they knew that the Osama thing wasn't true. The bin Laden thing wasn't true. All the story about how they dealt with that and the body around, it's all bullshit, okay? And that whole raid on the Osama bin Laden was kind of hurried and rushed. Why? Because they had to take the birth certificate thing that was failing the test within the public. They had to take it off. They had to have something dramatic. And so Obama's team that's running Obama, Team Obama, he's the figurehead. Other people were actually pulling the strings and doing it, including back at SES. They used, Osama bin Laden to take the birth certificate off. It's once you start with one lie, then you have to do another one. Then you got to have a lie for the cover up the earlier lie, and that's this whole stream of things that's going on.
Yep.
All of that has to stop, and the only way to cure this kind of a cancer, this kind of a disease, is you have to cut it all out. You have to destroy it all. You have to eviscerate it. You can't leave a drop of it there. So all of those players that were involved in all of that mischief, Hillary, Brennan, the Obamas, Comey, all of those have to be removed, and justice must be served. They can't just be out with their retirement or just stripped of their retirement. They can't go to a jury of their peers. So, for example, this is a really important point. I apologize for droning on, but I want to get this one thing out. Why isn't it appropriate to try someone like, say, Brennan or Comey or Hillary before a jury of their peers in a Justice Department action where they can get out on bail, they can provide their defense, they can do the argument, they can help pick the jury? The things that we've just talked about, Mike, concerning directed energy weapons, concerning military platforms and systems and chain of command and things like that. If you bring that before a civilian jury, they're not equipped, mom raising the kids, grandma having raised some kids, somebody that's a mathematician or an insurance examiner. They're not really equipped for the kinds of information they're going to have to hear and understand. And some of it has to remain classified. So in a military tribunal, the defendant still gets an attorney, but they get access to classified materials. That's why at Gitmo, they had to extend and build out a larger area and new areas where the classified materials would be able to be reviewed by the defendant's attorneys in the coming trials to prepare a defense. And some of what has to be presented in those trials cannot be presented and known by the public. It will be referenced generically, but it involves classified systems for acquiring information, communicating it, etc. And so it's going to have to be heard in a classified setting. And the judges that sit on the tribunal, it's not a jury of their peers, it's judges sitting on a tribunal, hear the evidence, including classified evidence that they have been cleared to hear, and then make those decisions based on what they know. And they're prepared for that because they usually in a tribunal, you'll have different expertise of the judges that are going to be needed for different areas of the trial in this kind of a setting. And that's going to be needed in this thing. So it's not appropriate to hear some of the testimony and to see some of the evidence in a non-classified setting and by people that aren't familiar with some of the terms, authorities, responsibilities from a military perspective. It just isn't appropriate. That's why My Lai with Lieutenant Calley was heard with the military tribunal. It was a war crime there in Vietnam. It was debated whether he would be tried in the justice system and shut down almost immediately. No chance. He's going to be, this is going to be heard in a military tribunal setting. And it's the same thing here. These are crimes against humanity. They're war crimes against the United States, against other countries in the world, in the way that our election was stolen. And then the people who got there through fraud and deceit then went on these murderous rampages to allow things like Ukraine to happen. And by the way, last thing I'll say in this regard, no one in this audience, especially, should forget when you're talking, you're going to get asked by relatives and friends, other business, associates, etc. in your life. You cut a wide swath within this audience. You're going to get asked at various times about these things.
Mm-hmm.
You must include the shot and COVID. The reason COVID was introduced exactly when it was for cover, for a pretense to go to the electronic votes and ballots, remote voting, the drop boxes, all of that. And remember, Zuckerberg didn't invent Facebook. It was called LifeLog. He's a DARPA creation. If he's successful, he's successful because something that was created by the American people, taxpayers, over at DARPA that cost $100 million a year for 5 years, $500 million to build, was given to Zuckerberg. For some reason, he's the guy that it was gifted to. And then he's put out Facebook to the whole world. When he had $500 million to give to help out states and counties with drop boxes and election machines. He wasn't doing it of his own accord. He was following orders. He is somebody's tool, and it's within the military industrial system. And it was aided by COVID. It was aided by the shot. China is who was supervising those technicians in Serbia. China.
Wow.
Was running the operation in Serbia in the building that Brennan was half owner on, where the vote in 2020 was flipped. It was China that printed the extra ballots that were shipped into the United States and spread out through the mail system in votes in various states to flip the election to match what the computers did on the electronic side from Serbia, with Chinese operatives present. China is where the COVID thing was masterminded and finished, with the COVID conference in November of 2019, okay, that Gates and Kissinger and all these other people showed up at. By the way, Kissinger, he's like a whole wall at Amway at their world headquarters. And by the way, what did Amway do? They switched to PayPal for all their payment stuff. And then last year, they decided, we're going to just go to PayPal of China for all of our payments worldwide.
Wow.
And by the way, where was some of the COVID treatments and shots come from? One of the branch office things at the Van Andel Institute, they're tied into the whole Amway thing. You got to think about what's going on here. This is so much bigger than most people realize. Corporations, billionaires, social media, networks, all working together. How do you coordinate all that? Senior Executive Service on the U.S. side and Serco in the British Commonwealth. This is so much bigger than most people have even begun to think. And not just Trump. Trump was invited to run. Who invited him? He's told you, 200 generals. We're in the middle of the greatest military campaign, coup, operation in the history of humanity. In our generation right now, it's all happening right in front of you. And the first shots across the bow have already occurred. We're now getting ready to zero in and take out the command centers of these huge vessels that we're fighting. And we're going to take out all of their key players, and they're going to be arrested. I think tail end of August will be or October, excuse me, will be very interesting. You want to know where the arrests begin? It's after the testimony in mid-October, and a couple weeks later, the arrests begin, and they will continue for a very long time. There'll be clusters within certain things, culminating sometime next year with the arrests related to 2020 theft, which is the worst of the worst because that's when they put Biden in, took Trump out, and that's where all of the worst of the offenses actually occurred. So we're in an amazing moment, and it's going to affect countries all over the world. As far away as right here at the southern tip of South Africa.
Wow. Way to bring that together. Wow, amazing. And I know you're up really late now. Let's honor Jen, JenniferMax.com.
Well, and she's got she literally sold out of all of the last of her Detox Delish books. And she doesn't want to republish that one. I wanted to republish it. She wants to do another book completely. And so she's put a special sale. I had moved some of my Watch the Water books, the Japanese English version of my book, over there, which has a lot of cool extra things to it that's pretty fun. It's both Japanese and English. And she moved that over there and put a special together just a few hours ago with her her protocols for going after parasites. And just so people understand, part of the problem with the COVID, whether you got the shot or not, with the shedding and effects on your body function, because we're all exposed to the mRNA directly and indirectly if you got the shot or if you're just around other people that did with the shedding. It knocked down certain areas of your immune system. And then this is not really understood by people. So I think I'm probably saying this for the first time, anybody hearing it in any of the audiences out there. When we talk about parasites, first thing that people say is, well, I've been taking ivermectin and fenbendazole and some of the other things, tetracycline for like the fish and like that, to knock down parasites. The reality is, so I'm fine because I take ivermectin. The reality is that only hits certain of the waterborne parasites. It's only arguably about 20% of the parasites that are common to humans. And there's about 3,000 parasites that are pretty common. That's a pretty high number, but there's lots of little variations. And they're in certain families, dozen families or whatever or less. If you get into the numbers, it's 10 times that as far as the actual number of parasites cataloged in various ways. So, but the problem is, if you knock down with ivermectin and fenbendazole, one class of the parasites, you say, okay, well, I've knocked out, say, 20%. You still got 80% of them there, but there's another weird thing that happens. If you only hit one group of them, it becomes opportunistic for others to fill those gaps. And so your parasite load may come down initially, but then come back up with other things becoming more prevalent because it's like certain plants block other plants from living in an area. The parasites that the ivermectin takes out, it blocks those out. Those other things coming in. When you take them out, it's new ground for other stuff to move in. So you really have to go after the parasite problem in your body from lots of different directions. And my friend Hulda Clark years ago talked extensively that all disease was parasitic in origins. in the way it expressed. And I think it's becoming more and more understood to be true. Blood parasites that nobody was really looking at, microparasites that actually get inside the blood cell, being responsible for certain types of cancers. This is really important stuff. There's some great protocols. There's some amazing people that have done just stunningly important work in addressing the parasite issues, but they tend to be in certain brackets or channels. And so trying to be a bit more holistic and all the different things, Jen's put together just a couple page pamphlet that she's had, you know, coated in the plastic so that it'll survive. That's kind of a reference for people starting to go after these parasites that are there. And because of the shot, it knocked down the immune responses of people and it created extra opportunities within the herd, if you will. We now have more parasites and more virulent types of parasites than we had even 5 years ago. So, as well as, by the way, I'll just mention I'm in for penny in for pound. Some of the spraying that was being done across the country that we've complained about in some of the farm environments, there's allegations, and I believe they have merit for different reasons, that certain of those groups that were doing the spraying were actually sifting in certain parasites into some of those spraying areas in these fog regions like that. So that's something that we'll have to do more research on to build out. But you have to be not just on the defensive, but on the attack. And the most important thing for everybody that's heard me talk about this before, one thing that is a pun, a messy subject, but it's got to be said. You have to consider what I'm going to tell you right now. These parasites, many of them, especially as they get bigger and as they get more embedded in your bodily systems, they have a texture to them oftentimes that is almost like Velcro. And inside your digestive tract, inside your vein system, etc., if you kill them using certain protocols to kill them, and you don't get them flushed out, they rot and decay in those places and cause other types of issues. If you're going to kill parasites, if you're going to take different types of treatment approaches, you have to do enemas. You've got to help flush them out. Coffee, warm water, lemons, things like that, to help to wash out your digestive tract and to wash the casings out. It's not just the parasites. The parasites create casings in your body, and they're a biome, kind of a casing, literally tissue, bodily tissue, that they have that surrounds where they're living, and that casing is very hard to break down. It can be done. There's certain things you can take that help break down the casing that the parasite is living in, and then makes them more vulnerable to some of the things that you can take to knock them down, but to take them out. And so it's more complicated than I took my ivermectin. And those people in this audience that want to live longer and healthier and more vibrantly need to consider that, as Hulda Clark, my friend, said, all disease is traceable to parasitic infections. That's what she believed. That's what her research showed. People can argue over it, but I think the case is becoming better made every day that in fact these cancers and other diseases that are there are opportunistically there as some kind of a byproduct of the presence of parasites. And so I want this audience to be totally healthy and not ignorant of what's going on here. We're being attacked in lots of ways. It didn't end with the COVID or the shot.
Yeah.
And there's an aftermath to that was caused because our balance physiologically as a herd was thrown off by these artificial things. The last thing I'll say here on this, Michael, I know I'm going on, but I want to help people. A lot of the blood clotting that we've seen where there, I had somebody that everybody in this audience would know the name of, who had multiple blood clots pulled out of their veins. And they're set on the thing beside him after the doctors have taken them out. And you look at it and go, oh my gosh, that's the most grotesque thing I've ever seen. And they get one out and it's, 1.5 feet, 2 foot long. And they go back in a couple weeks later, they take another one and another one out. And when you look at it, and knowing what we know now about some of the parasitic things, look, they're not just moving in the digestive tract. They're not just moving in the kidneys or the liver or the lungs or the heart. Who's ever heard of heartworms in dogs or in animals? And you give them certain things to help get the heartworms out of the animal to save the animal's life. One of the
and when they poop and all those worms are all in that poop.
Oh my
God. Oh.
So okay. I could tell you stories after stories, but Jen and I have some close friends that have a small baby, and they were thinking about this and talking about pinworms, and said, "Well, you should probably consider it because of where they'd been and things that were going on." And so, simple pinworm medicine, and it's cheap, and you can get it at any of the pharmacies. It's common, okay, but they'd never even thought about this. So the wife wasn't that moved by it, but the dad said, no, we're going to do it. We're not taking any chances. Well, he happened to be the one to do the big diaper change, and he was absolutely, oh my gosh, don't send me the video, please. The baby poops and it's full of worms.
Oh no.
Oh my gosh. And the wife is like, what? And that was in the baby. These pinworms, and they're still moving as they're coming out of the baby. Their digestive tract goes faster. But that can be in any adult. Okay, that's just one kind. And ivermectin doesn't take out pinworms, by the way.
Hmm.
Okay, so there's lots of stuff that people need to be aware of. So Jen has that pack over there. She put a lot of work into this. It may sound simple enough, but she put a lot of work into this. It's a nice reference, and we'll continue to do more on it. But she put a pack together with one of my books because she's out of the detox list, and we're going to do some other stuff. We're just, as you can see, so busy on certain things, and I've got stuff I have to return to DC on, and back to London and Paris on here and the Mideast over the next couple of weeks. So we're just super swamped. But this is on our to-do list early on because I think this is going to save a lot of lives and quality of life for people. So anyway, Michael, you are so relaxed to let me kind of drone on like I do. It helps me to get some
why wouldn't I be? You're just like, you revealed so much. This is like I say almost every show that it's like, this is the biggest reveal. This one by far, I think of all the shows you've done is going to be the one that people really come to. And because you just laid it all out. God, I'm gonna have to talk about this show for like weeks. Very well done.
I appreciate this audience is one of my very favorite audiences, and the people that'll stick through all the way like this, I appreciate it, and I hope that you felt like you got stuff every step of the way through the show that helped, and I want everybody here, doing the best and enjoying life and having a great experience as we go through these next moments.
completely agree.
I want to see you all on the other side of all these events. Plus, in the next world, you only get their salvation by the blood of Christ. I want to see you in this world and the next. If I don't get to meet you here, I want to meet you there. Let's all get through this together. Where we go one, we go all. Every last one of you are included. Let's go together.
Awesome. Thank you, Juan. And thanks everybody to join us, and we'll see you guys next time.